Welcome to the Anti-Architect Podcast. I am your host, Christian Giordano. As president and owner of the architecture and design firm Mancini Duffy, I am driven by a quest for learning and radically changing the architecture industry through tech-first innovation. With this podcast, I am hoping to improve the industry that I am so passionate about by taking a critical look at how architects work with their clients, and in turn, how our clients view us. It is my goal to showcase all of these experiences, good and bad. Was it the architect or the client or somewhere in between? I aim to bring my audience new voices from around our industry, interesting people with diverse backgrounds. Through shared experiences, stories, and projects, my hope is that we can improve our profession. Hello, Anti-Architect Podcast listeners, and welcome to 2022. We are kicking off year 2 of the podcast with a very special guest, actually a big-time guest. Chris Voss is the CEO and founder of the Black Swan Group, as well as the author of the awesome book, Never Split the Difference, Negotiating as If Your Life Depended on It. For most of his career, Chris was the lead international kidnapping and hostage negotiator for the FBI. He has saved countless lives and hostages around the world, some of which we will speak about today, and many that remain top secret. During his career, he also represented the U.S. government at the G8 as an expert in kidnapping. Prior to becoming the FBI lead international negotiator, Chris served as the lead crisis negotiator for the New York City division of the FBI and was a member of the New York City Joint Terrorist Task Force for 14 years. He led the teams of several high-profile cases such as Sheikh Omar Abdul Rahmani, the TWA 800 catastrophe, and negotiated the surrender of the first hostage takeover to give up the JP Morgan Chase bank robbery. He has used his many years of experience in international crisis and high-stakes negotiating to develop a unique program and team that applies these globally proven techniques to the business world. During Chris's 24-year tenure at the Bureau, he was trained in the art of negotiating by not only the FBI, but Scotland Yard and Harvard Law School. He is also the recipient of the Attorney General's Award for Excellence in Law Enforcement and the FBI Agents Association Award for Distinguished Service. Chris has taught business negotiation in the MBA programs as an adjunct professor at many universities around the globe, including Harvard and Georgetown. He also has a masterclass series on their website teaching many of the lessons in his book. How did I land such an A-list guest, you ask? Me too. It turns out Chris and I have a mutual friend named Jonathan Smith, so thank you, Jonathan. In this episode, we do not talk about the architecture profession per se. However, we do apply Chris's negotiating tactics to the architect and client relationship, designers and how they negotiate their designs, and employees and the employer negotiation when it comes to salaries. I hope you enjoy this and get something out of it that you can find useful and valuable. As you will hear, Chris is way too cool to be on my little podcast, but he was awesome enough to spend an hour. I can't thank him enough. He's such a great guy. So let me kind of set the stage for you. This podcast is about architecture. It's not really about like the beauty of architecture and it's not really about the technical aspects of architecture. It's really more about the profession as a whole. And, I'm trying to bring the audience a different perspective kind of people both inside and outside the field. And then showcase like the good and the bad, what we do well, what we can improve on. I want it to be honest and critical of our profession and architects, but then ultimately a positive impact on the future of the profession. That's really, so to kind of set the stage for you as to, kind of what this podcast is about. So it's not necessarily to talk, actual architecture itself. So.
Okay.
Cool.
All right. Fair enough.
Yeah. So I guess my goal today is, how can you as a hostage negotiator help architects, and what lessons can we take from your teachings and, apply them in what we do? And what I was thinking was, I want to kind of talk about your experience and kind of set the stage for everyone that's listening. But then, you say everything's a negotiation, throughout your life. And I truly think that is the case with design professionals for sure. It's a constant negotiation between, the client and the architect, the designer and the client, and the budget and the contractor, and then the employee and the employer. So ultimately, we'll kind of come back around to those kind of things and how all your techniques could ultimately apply here. So does that sound good?
It works for me.
Awesome. So, before we get to all that, can you tell us a little bit about your backstory? I know you're a former FBI hostage negotiator, CEO of the Black Swan Group. You're the co-author of the book, Never Split the Difference. I have my copy from that event right here. Actually, I think I have 3 copies of it. And you have that master class, which is a huge accomplishment and really awesome. So, where did you grow up? What did your parents do? Stuff like that.
Yeah, middle class, blue collar, Iowa, Midwestern guy. Small town in Iowa, about 7,000 people. Son of Richard and Joyce Voss, Mount Pleasant, Iowa. Dad was a sole proprietor, solo entrepreneur, was what's referred to as an oil jobber, which is a middleman between the major company and the end user, whether that end user be a gas station or an industry or a large farm, small industry, large farm. His job was to get the shell products to them. So, grew up in a blue collar environment. My father figured, if he provided his kids room and board, then they needed to work for him. Now he paid us, but we went to work, and he was a very figure it out guy. Like there'd be a task, he'd want us to figure out how to do it. He didn't really believe in holding your hand and coddling you in any way. Like one of my favorite stories is, he wanted a bigger garage in his backyard, and we had a small, tiny barely one car garage. The old one had to be torn down. I was probably 11 at the time. I think my sister was probably 13, somewhere in that age. He handed us a couple of crowbars, said, go out in the back, tear down the garage. So, because stuff had to be done. So yeah. I grew up in a figure it out environment, which I think is contributed to, hard work and figure it out.
Yeah.
Work hard and figure it out. Because so much of life, people stop learning, or people think they got to be taught or have to be shown. And the vast majority of your challenges, it's up to you to figure it out. Take some initiative, work hard, and figure it out. In my company, the Black Swan Group, the thing they hear me say over and over again is the only sin is not to learn. Mm. You got to try it. You got to figure it out. You're going to make mistakes. I got no problem if you make mistakes. I got a problem if you made it 7 times in a row and we kept telling you how to do it right and you didn't catch on. Now we got a problem.
Yep.
But figure it out and learn.
Yeah, listen, that's actually very relevant to architecture itself, because a lot of what we do is figuring it out. And, we throw people right out of school into projects that, all of a sudden they're responsible for, building a building or figuring out a detail. And, you're working with them, but they've got to make their own mistakes. They've got to see why it doesn't work, when you get there. Like I always say that I have a great example of, I designed a building. I was pretty seniored at that point. I designed a building, incredible TV station. It had this crazy inside connecting stair, these 2 floors. The contractor took me aside at one of the meetings and said, "How the hell are we supposed to build this?" And I said, "What do you mean? I drew it. It's perfect." And he said, "Well, we can't actually get a physical person in on one side of the stair. It's too close. You put it 2 inches away from the wall. We can't finish it. We can't get to the structure." And I said, "But oh shit, I'm screwed. How am I going to fix that? Luckily, they said, don't worry, we have a solution for you. We're actually going to do it through the outside of the building and work our way through and then close up the building. So they figured it out. But sure enough, ever since then, man, do I now know how to really think about something like, oh yeah, a person physically is building this. That's a pretty important detail to remember when you're designing something.
Yeah, no kidding. Wow. Yeah, I could definitely see how, with the lack of experience, it would be an easy mistake to make.
Yeah, absolutely. So where'd you go to college?
Iowa State University, affectionately known back in those days as Moo U.
Moo U.
Because I went there because my older sister went there.
Okay.
When I was a kid, I idolized my older sister. And she went to college there. I wanted to get away from home. I didn't want to be too far from home. It was about a 3.5-hour drive. I want to be far enough I get home on weekends, but the old man at 4 o'clock in the afternoon couldn't say, hey, get over here. I got something I need you to work on right now.
Mm-hmm.
And it was originally was designed academically for farmers to go to. They've still changed it, but to a regular semester system. But how do you design it for farmers? Farmers got to be in the fields in the spring and the fall. So what you do is, instead of having 2 semesters, you have 3 quarters, if you will. The summer is a quarter. And then a standalone wintertime quarter, farmers could go to school there and get to earn their degree by going in the wintertime. So it was a great school. I enjoyed it a lot. Very, very blue collar, figured out academic environment.
Now, what ultimately drew you to law enforcement?
Well, I saw a movie
instead of farming.
When I was a kid. I was 16. I saw this movie called The Super Cops.
Okay.
About true story. Two New York City cops. Appealed to me 2 ways. Obvious one, in hindsight, I realized they had a lot of fun. They were very creative. They worked in the toughest neighborhoods in New York City. It did a lot of good. The community loved them. No matter what community you have, they're, if not the majority or a significant percentage, are good people. And these guys were working in tough neighborhoods.
Sure.
And the good people loved them. A couple of white dudes work in Bed-Stuy, which is all black, which tells you, people care what you're about. They really just care what you're about.
Sure.
The other thing I didn't realize in hindsight was these guys were real mavericks. I mean, they didn't pay any attention to what their commanders told them to do. And I pretty much did that most of my bureau career, ignored what the senior management told me to do.
And then so you're in law enforcement, and where were you originally stationed, or where'd you originally work?
Cop in Kansas City for 3 years, street cop, KCMO, not KCK.
Okay.
KCMO. And then signed on to the bureau from there, and they picked me up, moved me to Pittsburgh, then to New York.
Ah, okay. So that's right. You were in New York, and how does the FBI come about? Is that directly through the New York job? Yeah,
no. While I was a cop, I was getting a little bit bored with my second assignment, and my father, who paid for my college degree, and I promptly went out and got a job that didn't require a college degree. If that had been my kid, I'd ask for my money back. But he realized that I was going to stay in law enforcement, so he wanted me to get me interested in federal law enforcement. Introduced me to a Secret Service guy, and the Secret Service guy said, "Man, I've traveled all over the world with the Secret Service."
Oh, cool.
And I remember thinking, like, really? Like, somebody paid to send you around the world? I got to find out what that's about. So fortunately, the Secret Service wasn't hiring at the time. The FBI was. I didn't know one agency from another. So I signed on to the FBI. They were hiring a bunch of folks. I was fortunate. It was a hiring push, and I got in.
Oh, nice.
And that's who sent me first to Pittsburgh and then New York.
Ah, okay. And in New York, you were on the Joint Terrorism Task Force, correct?
Joint Terrorist Task Force, FBI, NYPD were really the only players at the time, since, like every agency in New York, after the terrorism events happened, But it was just FBI and NYPD when I was there.
Were you involved in any of the terrorism with as far as the bombing and the World Trade Center and 9/11? Were you part of that task force then?
Well, as it turned out, it was in a precursor to all that. The first time they hit the Trade Center was 93, and I was working there then. Historians view that really as sort of the birth of Al-Qaeda.
Sure.
The Khalid Sheikh Mohammed is the guy that organized 9/11, and it was literally his nephew that masterminded the attack in 93.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So I did a lot of investigation. I'd left New York by the time 9/11 happened. I'd done investigation that contributed to that case in a small way.
Okay.
But the guys and gals that made that case were always very close friends of mine.
Okay. Yeah. And interestingly enough, our office, Mancini Duffy, which is the company I now own, was always in the World Trade Center. So it was there for that bombing and then was also there when 9/11 occurred. And we've done, we did actually on 9/11, we did a whole tribute to that. But actually nobody from the office died, thankfully, in either of those attacks. But the owner at the time, this guy, Tony Sharippa, credits the fact that because of the bombing, in 93, they actually got stuck in the building. They weren't allowed to leave. And so because of that, and they were also looted, the office was looted. So Tony immediately, the minute that the World Trade Center happened, thankfully it was on the other tower, he told everyone, we got to get out of here. And more so because he just thought they were going to get stuck there for the entire day. And so he ended up saving everybody's life that worked at the company at the time.
Wow.
Yeah. Crazy, right?
That's crazy.
So an interesting connection with that. So how do you become a hostage negotiator? How does that come about for your career? And how did you know you were going to be good at it?
Yeah, well, no, you can be good at anything if you put the effort into it. I mean, Daniel Coyle wrote a book called The Talent Code, and his contention is nothing is natural, everything is learned. Now, I'm not sure that that's a completely 1,000% blanket statement, but it's darn close. He says that the prodigies just got interested earlier than anybody noticed and started getting their 10,000 hours in sooner. So I was a SWAT guy, but I had a recurring knee injury. I had my knee reconstructed twice, as a matter of fact. I wanted to stay in crisis response. We had negotiators. I didn't figure it was hard. I thought to myself, I talk to people every day. How hard can it be? I could talk to terrorists. And so I was fortunate enough. I had to prove some initiative, pass some unofficial tests to get on the team in New York. Initially was rejected. But then when I got into it, I was like, that was more satisfying and, changed the entire course of my life, let alone my career.
Wow, that's amazing. And so are there some hostage negotiations that stand out to you as sort of pivotal in your career? Yeah,
there are a couple. I mean, and they're in the book, Never Split the Difference. The first one was a Chase Manhattan bank robbery. And, I talked a bank robber into coming out and surrendering to me. And I learned a lot. I think the thing I learned most there was to just rely on a process. Get a good process. You're not going to lean into your process and constantly be working at it because they're all perishable skills. Then a number of years later, right after we'd had a spectacular success in the Philippines, it was followed up with a spectacular failure. I mean, just a train wreck of a case. A lot of hostages got killed. 2 out of the 3 Americans died. First one was murdered. The second one that died was killed by friendly fire 13 months later. But it was, traumatic events. There's either post-traumatic stress or there's post-traumatic growth. And it's one of the books I'm reading these days, Anti-Fragile by Nassim Nicholas Taleb, who also wrote The Black Swan, which is the name of my company. He talks about something called anti-fragile, and he points out not that many people are willing to talk about post-traumatic stress growth. If you get knocked down real hard, you can stay down or you could get up. And if you want to get up, you got to learn. You know, what the famous Irish philosopher and statesman Colin McGregor, the MMA guy, you know, I win or I learn.
That's right. I win or I learn.
You got to learn.
Yeah.
You're going to get kicked in the gut hard. You're going to get knocked down. That's unavoidable. And whether or not you play a victim and you whine and complain and you draw people's attention, woe is me, or you pick yourself up and get better. Pick yourself up and get better. It gives you a better life.
Yeah, amazing. So could you take a few minutes and kind of talk through some of the main topics that are in your book? And I just kind of pulled a few in my notes that, always have stood out to me. Tactical empathy, mirroring, which is, we could talk about that in a bit, labeling, that sort of saying no, which is, I suck at that. Triggers, controls, and then my favorite is active listening. And I think that listening is a skill that I think if I had to take one thing from your book is that listening is such a difficult thing to do, and really be able to not formulate my thoughts as someone else is speaking, and therefore I'm not listening to them whatsoever. And I think this kind of comes into the whole architecture thing, which we can talk about in a few minutes. But yeah, if you could take a few minutes and just kind of talk about each one of those kind of subjects that you broach.
Yeah, well, it's really about great collaboration. Tactical empathy in a Black Swan method is the large umbrella that all of this stuff comes under. And when you really wrap your minds around what empathy really is, which is demonstrating understanding without agreement and not expressing your point of view, but really getting into the other person's head and articulating what's there. I mean, that's one of the biggest accelerants for collaboration that there is. I mean, and it seems very indirect, but the book, the chapter that sold the book is the third chapter. The two words that transform any negotiation, when you get your counterpart to say, that's right. Mm-hmm. And nobody'd ever talked about negotiation where the focus wasn't yes. And yes is such a red herring. Yes is most often counterfeit. People say yes because they're placating you. They want to find out what you know. They're pumping you for information. You're a competing bid, your due diligence. There's a million reasons why people say yes, and it's counterfeit. More often than not, it's counterfeit. I would say 9 times out of 10, it's either completely counterfeit or laden with reservations that it's useless. So my book started out with get out of the yes business, get into the that's right business. Getting a that's right out of somebody. They bond with you. They open up to you. You want to get out of a client what their vision is when their vision isn't fully formed anyway, and they're still fumbling around, having trouble sorting out all the thoughts in their head. The tactical empathy approach is the accelerator of that. You get in there fast. You find out what's in their head fast. And how do you know that you found out what was in there? Because they said that's right. They're gonna tell you. You don't gotta guess. There is no guesswork when you've fully run the method, the Black Swan method, and then you get there faster. Mm-hmm. So that's really it. And you talked before about listening. In any negotiation book, in any book, listening is always listed as an advanced skill, always. And you're as naive as I was when I was trying to become a hostage negotiator. Yeah, well, all day long, other people are talking when I'm not talking. Therefore, I must be listening. Listening is not failing to talk. Listening is not waiting your turn, or even active listening. That's why we put in the word tactical. It's proactive. Mm-hmm. Like, having since I left the FBI, learned far more about neuroscience. Neuroscience more important than psychology. Tactically, I could tell you how the brain works. Knowing that, I could tell you exactly what Black Swan skills to use to get at the heart of the matter faster than you would have any other way. Mm. So that's really what it is. It's indirect acceleration of great collaboration.
Amazing. And talk a little bit about mirroring, because it's difficult to do. When you read it, I know when I took your seminar, I think at one point I think it was your son that was with you, kind of was going around the room and trying to, kind of get us on things, right? Or giving us scenarios and what would we say. And I think I picked mirroring because I thought, all right, I had read that part of the book, seems pretty easy, but it's not as easy to do in real life. Can you explain it? And then how can we practice that? How can we really kind of use it in everyday life?
Difficult to do.
Yeah, see? Yes, it's difficult to do.
Now, when I did it just now, that was a mirror, ladies and gentlemen, back home. And please do try this at home. What did you feel when I first did that?
You question yourself, right? It kind of puts me back on my heels and go, difficult to do. Why is it difficult to do? Now I have to think of, all right, well, why? Okay.
So it triggered introspection is what you're saying.
Yeah.
All right. Now, and those of you that are watching this, you didn't see him get angry. He knew he was being mirrored. He felt the introspection trigger. He felt like, what do I got to do to explain this? He smiled and he laughed, which was not anger. And I every time somebody mirrors me, I always feel drawn towards it. I always feel drawn to respond in a more introspective fashion.
Mm-hmm.
And so the mirror is just repeating 1 to 3 words of what somebody's just said. When we're teaching it, we usually teach people to mirror the last words, because you can be so caught off guard by what they said that your brain dumps almost everything because you're astonished. But somewhere in the deep recesses of your brain, you can say the last 3 words, which is a great skill to get your balance back if you've been truly caught off guard by what somebody said.
Mm-hmm.
And then what it does is it triggers introspection in the other side, exactly like what just happened with you. And you ask yourself, okay, so how do I explain this better using different words?
Yeah.
It's a superior replacement for what did you mean by that?
Yeah. Okay.
Because it gets a stream of consciousness. It lets people know that the words that they just used helped but were inadequate. So simply repeating the same words isn't going to work. Like most of the time, if you'd have said it's difficult to do, and I'd said, what do you mean by that? You'd gone, difficult to do. I mean, how much clearer can it be? Those words are clear. They're not multi-syllable words. You'd want to repeat the same thing, only louder.
Yeah.
Which, if somebody doesn't get your meaning, repeating the same thing only louder ain't going to get the job done.
Yeah.
So that's one of the beauties of mirroring. I mean, it triggers introspection on the other side. It makes them feel like responding with a better explanation.
Mm-hmm. It's great because, so if we kind of take it to the whole architect, client relationship, right? And I'll kind of explain for you, most architecture firms, for good or for bad, we sell hours, right? And we're a big architecture firm. We compete with the biggest in the world. And so we're selling hours. We're not selling value. And we try to sell value in certain circumstances. There are some architects that are what we would call the black cape architects that kind of come in. You've heard their names like Frank Gehry and things like that. Come in and they can kind of command whatever they want because they're the artist and they're being hired for that. But the rest,
black cape, I love that.
The rest are, it's a service business like a lawyer, except that it's only a quarter of the amount of hourly rate that an architect gets. And I think in our business, if I hear a lot, that's some of the frustration that we have to deal with, right? So if we're going after a job and we put together our fee plan and to determine how much it's going to cost to build something. And, it's basically how many people, how many hours is it going to take? How long is the project? We build this thing. It's actually quite scientific. It's a pretty proven method. We know exactly what each phase is going to do. We've done this hundreds, if not thousands of times, and therefore we know it. But architects, including myself, we live out of fear of losing the job to the next guy. And I think that goes for probably 90% of the architects that would listen to this podcast or in the same sort of realm that we're in. And so getting talked down from $500,000 in fee to $450,000 in fee, that's the profit. That's gone. But, well, in my mind, that's better than zero in fee. And I got all these people to keep employed and keep things moving. And I love what I do. And we love designing buildings or designing interiors. There's some other things about that drive the price in the market down, which is not good for the profession as a whole. But what of your tactics that that we just talked about? How is best to deal with something like that? I know that's a very general way of asking, but when the client does come and say, "Well, can you do this for $450,000?" without immediately saying yes, what would your thoughts be on that?
Yeah, well, you're gonna respectfully explore the agreement, if you will. You don't have to say yes. You don't have to say no, regardless of what the person says on the other side. You got to find out where they're coming from. And so the first best response, which is going to horrify a lot of people, but is really the best thing to do, is to say, "Wow, it sounds like the value is just not there for you." Because first of all, you got to make sure that you're not the fool in the game. They're not using you as a competing bid. Mm-hmm. Everybody has to deal with that. So secondly, you got to find out for sure what the problem really is. And you got to respectfully, is it a price issue? Probably not. But it's not guaranteed that it's a price issue. If they're going to test you on a price, just see if they can test you on a price too. Mm-hmm. It might be part of their entertainment. Can I get them to knock it down? And so why not try? Especially if you guys are developing a reputation that you're gonna toss your cards quickly and you get a cut rate job. So you got to find out what's going on. There are a lot of people out there that their mantra in business is do not agree to anything until the other side has rejected you or squealed, if you will, twice. The only way to test a price is to test it hard, not once, but twice. And then if you've tested it twice, it's a good price, and you could hang in there. So if your responsive sounds like the value is just not there for you, begins to meet their criterion of having the price tested. So they want to stress test the price. They don't know that you didn't pad it. Like if they figure you pad it, that's what they do.
Yeah.
So they want to know what the real price is. You don't have to say yes or no right away. You explore it, and the first way to explore it sounds like the value is just not there for you, because you got to find out: are they testing you? Did they figure you padded the price? Are they assuming that your own best business interests, and therefore you built in a margin so you could cut the price? A lot of people do that. They're still trying to figure out exactly what's going on with you. So the first and easiest way is to test the price.
Yeah, absolutely. And listen, there are plenty of clients that understand the value. And, those are the kind of clients and the relationships that we really value, because then they come back and they understand that what they got for the price, whatever it might have been, was exactly what they were looking for. The experience was great. The service was great. The design ultimately was great. And most actually make money from that design, right? If design is done well, the client has a lot to gain from that. If design is not done well, they have a lot to lose. And so that weird negotiating that goes on for over pennies in the end is almost nothing when it's all said and done as far as the construction goes. So, the other thing I was thinking about was, as kind of where I think you could be helpful in sort of this art of negotiation here, is the designer, architect or designer, and the client, right? So the designer always has an agenda in their head, right? And they architects and designers work for the love of the art of what they do. It's very personal to them, right? They're not all, but most, you'd be surprised, are truly working for that, right? They're not working for the dollar. And so when they're interacting with a client and they're coming up with these amazing ideas, they struggle to see where their design and the client, if they don't gel, right? The designer rarely sits back and thinks, okay, well, what am I doing wrong? It's usually the opposite. It's the client doesn't understand why this design is so much better for them. And I, it's my work of art. And believe me, these things we've had, and I've done this too myself as a designer. Thought, man, that guy he just doesn't know what he's doing, But I like to think that over time I've learned to really listen a little bit better to what the client is actually saying and why. And I also think that for an architect and for a designer, they're negotiating with the client, but a lot of times the client is actually negotiating with their business or their cost to do something. And so they may not be necessarily arguing over the design. They may be arguing over, the cost or something like that. And so I guess the question is, how do designers listen better? And I know we talked about that earlier, the act of listening, but what's your feedback on those kind of scenarios?
Well, don't rush into a decision because you'll get there quicker on it and on an indirect route and a decision that'll keep. First of all, it's the theory, the point that I'm making, the strategy. You needed a decision to stick. So now how do we get there? The simplest, quickest way is to get back into a Black Swan method skill that is really the most go-to MacGyver skill, if you will, is this thing that we refer to as a label, sounds like. So when you're in a conversation, even starting the sentence with sounds like, you'll probably finish it pretty well. Now, if you're actually listening versus fake listening, which is waiting for your turn to talk, or waiting for holes in what they're saying, instead, if you're where you might have caught a hole, instead of going aha and pointing out their error, you say sounds like X is important to you. Sounds like you've given this a lot of thought. Sounds like you're struggling with several things here. Sounds like you're feeling some pressure. What you want to label is essentially the dynamic of what you feel they're expressing, and start to listen to your feel a lot more, because your feel is based on a ridiculously powerful supercomputer between your ears. And the more you listen to that feel, the more you'll hear it clearly and it'll be accurate. So sounds like, and use those words to feel your way through the conversation.
I like that. That's a great method. I think you're right. It's a lot of times it's a confrontation rather than a discussion, and it kind of happens off, right in the beginning there. And so that's a great method of diffusing it, I guess.
Well, let me give you a quick down and dirty on confrontation too, because one of the dictionary definitions of confrontation is a focused comparison. Now, very few people like confrontation or particularly enthusiastic about engaging in a conversation with a client that you're trying to develop trust with and have a long-term prosperous relationship. But a focused comparison, that doesn't sound all that bad. So it's frequently comparing what they're saying with what they're asking for, or comparing their intent with what they're expressing. So confrontation is really, look, you said this and you said this. How do those two things add up? If you want to confront, you see a contradiction, and your gut instinct is to say, this is a contradiction. This makes no sense. How could you be so stupid as to not see that? Well, just if you step back a little bit and ask yourself, what was the contradiction? Then you just hold the two up in front of your client and you say, how do these things add up? Secret to gaining the upper hand in a negotiation is giving the other side the illusion of control. And teeing up a confrontation in that manner maintains their own illusion of control when you actually have the upper hand.
That's great. Amazing. Switching gears to the employee and employer. Can you talk a little bit about salary negotiation? I know you've kind of done a few things on that. What do people do wrong? What do they do well? And I always think for me, like my A++ players at my work, I never even want them to ask for a raise, right? I'm always way ahead of them in terms of, making sure they're well compensated. But there are, we're in a post-pandemic world right now where I think people have come out of this in a different place and pretty stressed, and people want a little bit more for the stress that they're under. And I, as the owner, my CFO calls me Santa Claus because I love when people are happy, and I love when our employees are rewarded for working hard. Not sure Santa Claus is the right name for me, but what's your experience in the whole salary negotiation from not only the employee but the employer?
Well, the real problem. Salary negotiation, like any other deal, people get focused on price, and price doesn't make deals. Price will break a deal, but price is never what makes a deal a great deal. Also pertains to salary negotiations. Both sides should be, what do we focus on non-price terms that is going to make this spectacular? An employer focused on how do I make this person happy and successful? That's going to be an upward spiral. And really, if you're happy first, you will become more successful. A lot of people think it's the other way around. Sean Acker wrote did a great TED Talk, I think called The Happiness Advantage, where he says you're 31% smarter in a positive frame of mind. So be happy first. It'll be more likely to make you effective. So as an employer, the more you pay attention to your employees' happiness, the more effective they're going to be, and the less focused they're going to be on money. Now, if they're unhappy, they're going to want more money, and you can give it to them. And because they were unhappy, they're not going to be any more effective. Like you just paid somebody more money for the same results. Mm-hmm. That makes no sense as an employer. You want them to be more valuable to you. You don't get, you gotta, what are your goals in life? Like a friend of mine is a head of country for an international bank. He's the head of the U.S. international bank. And he sits down with his employees and say, where do you want to be in 5 years? And how can I help you get there? They are ridiculously loyal to this guy. They knock themselves out for this guy. So his focus is on making them happier people within substantial life goals. Not, how can you sleep later on a Saturday? I mean, he talks to them about who they are as human beings and what their contribution to the planet is. And then the idea is to interweave who someone is as a person with their employment. Then both benefit. And then they stay longer and they work harder. Now, as an employee, look, your salary pays your bills. It does not make your career. And a higher salary in a job that you are ridiculously unhappy with, you are still miserable. Money does not buy happiness. Mm-hmm. So focus on how, the critical question for an employee is to ask their boss, how do I become guaranteed to be involved in projects that are critical to our strategic future?
Yeah.
Now, first of all, you got to want to play in a big game. There are a lot of people that don't have an appetite for the big game, and this is not going to work if they got no appetite for the big game. But if you have the appetite for the big game, plus your boss knows that you do, oh, I got somebody who wants to make us all better.
Yeah.
Now that person's more valuable to me. I can pay you more if we collaborate on how to make you more valuable.
That is awesome. I love it. That is awesome. Thank you. So, last couple of questions, just out of curiosity, how has COVID affected what you do in your business?
Well, in the execution of the business, we were already running something called EOS, Entrepreneurial Operating System, and we were all already virtual because we're spread out all over the planet. So we pivoted quickly. I mean, we've got a specific business operating system. We didn't try to figure it out on our own. Mm-hmm. And thank God we had that, because we communicate extremely productively. And we went from having 90% of our revenue from in-person work get shut off overnight.
Wow.
And I mean, like literally.
Yeah.
We're almost all revenue just instantly shut off. But because we're running virtually on a system, we pivoted. Mm-hmm. We got together as a group. How do we solve this? What steps do we take? Even the brainstorming is very structured. Set priorities and execute. So, we pivoted great, and we will continue to pivot great because of we run EOS.
Yeah, same here.
All right. So you know how good that is.
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely, yeah.
And so then, some of these issues with employment today, I mean, these are legitimate issues. Yeah. Which is, equal pay for equal work. Most of that is equal pay for equal laziness. Like if I'm as lazy as the guy next to me, I should get paid as much as the guy next to me does. And if your workplace is not structured to make you productive, you got an argument, because that dude next to me ain't getting any more done than I am. So we should get paid the same.
Yep. My
company, we are based on performance. We get paid based on performance. We don't have work hours. Mm-hmm. We basically have work, the business hours we have to function in. But I don't care when you get your stuff done. Just get it done.
Exactly.
That's get it done, you're going to get paid. You don't get it done, you're not going to get paid. You're not going to last.
Yep.
You can't hang out at the water cooler because we don't have a water cooler. So, I'm shocked at the number of businesses that are not operating on a system.
Yep.
And if you don't have EOS, or I think there's 2 or 3 others out there.
Yeah, there's scaling up. There's traction. Well, that's EOS is traction.
Right. I heard somebody talk about something called a line over the weekend.
Okay.
Which is
they're all variations on the system. Yeah.
Right. But if you ain't got a system that somebody taught you, you're kidding yourself.
Yep, exactly. Nobody knows what they're supposed to do. There's no roadmap. There's no nothing. And yeah, it's difficult. I agree. Like we pivoted no problem into COVID. Some of our physical projects stopped, but ultimately they came back, which was great. And now I see COVID for us as architects and designers as an opportunity to do something different. The workplace needed a change, and now it's we're trying to figure out what the right balance is. And when I've told clients, it's an exciting time because now as your company, you don't have to do what the other guy's doing. You don't have to follow the trend. You can actually, for once, kind of sit back and think, oh, how do I actually function? What does my company do that's different from the other guy? As opposed to 2 years ago, all anybody wanted was, well, that guy built that. I want it to be that. That guy built that. I want it to look like that. So now we're finally into this independent thinking of how as a company, what am I going to use my space for if I go to an office? why am I going there, first of all? And then what do I do when I get there? And so we have very interesting conversations with our clients. It's actually turned out to be a lot of fun. If I would have known that 2 years ago when COVID happened, I would have saved a few years off the end of my life here. But, in the end, it's all turned out to be a positive experience. So.
Post-traumatic stress growth.
That's right. Exactly. So listen, thank you so much for taking the time. I really appreciate it. I hope everybody that listens to this gets something out of it. I think they will. I've read your book. I've actually listened to it too in the car rides as well. And so, what other things would you like to promote? I know you do a lot of other things. So I want to make sure I get them all right, especially when I promote this.
Yeah, well, the gateway to everything that we have is subscribing to our newsletter. It's complimentary, and it comes out once a week. It's not valuable because it's complimentary. It's valuable because it's concise and it's actionable. And it is the gateway to all the different negotiation products we have. We got a lot of stuff that's free. We got a lot of stuff that when you're ready for it, it's going to cost you, and it's going to be worth it. But you got to be ready for it. So the very best way, in addition to reading the book, subscribe to the newsletter, send a text. We got a text to sign up function. The number you text to is 33777. That's 33777.
Cool.
The message you send to that number is Black Swan Method, 3 words, spaces between the words, not cap sensitive, Black Swan Method to 33777.
Cool.
Get on the newsletter. We've got, it's a once a week actionable, concise article and notifications about the training. It's the gateway to our website, and there are massive resources there for you for free. So the Black Swan team can meet you where you are. We train and we coach. We'll coach people. If you got something burning right now where you don't have time to be trained up, we'll coach you through it.
Okay. That's wonderful. Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing that. We'll make sure that we promote it as well. And again, thank you so much for your time. I hope I get to see you in person again sometime soon.
Sometime soon. Yeah, very much.
Awesome.
Looking forward to that as well. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thank you. All right. Talk soon.